Hi, welcome to Introduction to Electronic Business Marketing 303. We're going to have an exciting journey where we try to understand issues attendant to the advent of the internet and new technologies, and how these technologies are leveraged to achieve business success. Now, in this first session, we're going to do an exploration of the two concepts of electronic business and electronic commerce. And my hope at the end of this session is that you, the student, will be able to understand e-business and e-commerce, be able to differentiate between e-business activities and e-commerce activities, and identify the various types, categories, benefits, and limitations of e-business. Now, let's work with a few definitional issues. So, electronic commerce is where business transactions take place via telecom networks, especially the internet, and it usually describes the buying and selling of products, services, and information via computer networks, including the internet. So, e-business, on the other hand, describes the broadest definition of e-commerce, and it includes customer service and intra-business tasks. It is frequently used, though, interchangeably with e-commerce. So e-business is the conduct of business on the internet, not only buying and selling, but also servicing customers and collaborating with business partners. I did a paper in 2010 where I tried to describe something called the e-value chain. And in that paper, I tried to advance the argument that the internet is useful not just for buying, not just for selling, but for other business functions like procurement, human resource management, even for trading staff. So there are all these various levels of application of the internet, or broadly e-business, for achieving commercial success. So e-business is more than just marketing, it's more than just customer service, but it's also outbound logistics and generally collaborating with business partners to achieve business success. Like we've alluded to earlier, e-commerce is the buying and selling of goods over the internet. But e-business is not just buying and selling, but also servicing customers and collaborating. So, generally speaking, when we think of e-commerce, we think of an online commercial transaction between a supplier and a client. However, even though this idea is right, we can be more specific and actually divide e-commerce into 6 major types, all with certain unique defining characteristics. So there are 6 basic types of e-commerce. You can have what we call business to business, where we describe electronic transactions of goods and services conducted between companies. In the business to consumer type of e-commerce, which is the second type, we try to establish business relationships, electronic business relationships between businesses and final consumers. So it more or less corresponds to the retail section of e-commerce where traditional retail trade normally operates. Then we have an interesting type called consumer to consumer, where what we are looking at is electronic transactions of goods and services conducted between consumers. Now, these transactions are conducted through a third party who provides an online platform where the transactions are actually carried out. Then we have a fourth manifestation, that's consumer to business, where you have a complete reversal of the traditional sense of exchanging goods. Now, this type of e-commerce is very common in crowdsourcing-based projects, and this is where a large number of individuals make their service or products available for purchase for companies seeking precisely these types of services or products. Then we have what we call business to administration e-commerce. Now, this part of e-commerce encompasses all transactions conducted online between companies and public administration. So this is an area that involves a large amount and a variety of services, particularly in areas such as fiscal, social security, employment, legal documents, land registries, and so on and so forth. Now, if you take the much touted success of countries like Rwanda, one of the things that distinguishing them is the quality of their business to administration interfaces, where they are introducing all types of processes that are sometimes referred to as e-government processes to make the administration of the country much smoother, more customer friendly, so people can set up businesses quicker, because the public sector agencies mandated to deliver services have become very expedient using technology as an enabler. So the last type of e-commerce is what we call consumer to administration. Now, in this model, we are looking at electronic transactions between individuals and public administration. So example of such applications will include education, social security, taxes, where you can file tax returns and do payments online, and so on and so forth. So we can also begin to discuss e-business categories, and here it gets very interesting, because you can talk about e-banking or e-banks, you can talk about e-trade, e-consulting, e-engineering, e-learning, e-mail, e-marketing, e-transaction, e-government. All these are ways of categorizing e-business activities, and they all have their utilities across various industries and deliver certain consumer benefits anytime they are deployed. If you take e-learning, for instance, I could sit here and deliver a lecture to students sitting at the University of the Free State in Bloemfontein, for instance, using technology platforms. So you can improve your efficacies, improve your business efficiencies if you deploy any or a combination of some of these e-business categories. So an increasingly popular phenomenon in frontier markets like Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and other jurisdictions is this whole notion of electronic markets. It's becoming very common now. And e-markets represent a network of interactions and relationships where information, products, services, and payments are exchanged. So an e-market is basically a place where shoppers and sellers meet electronically. So these sellers and buyers, they negotiate, they submit bids, they agree on orders, and they free the execution on or offline. I mean, for frontier markets, usually we have what we call brick and click. So whilst you're still doing a lot of the transactions online, there might still be a last mile solution that might be offline, where, for instance, you pay physical cash to have a product delivered to your house, and so on and so forth. So it's important to mention, if you haven't gleaned that by now, that e-commerce is interdisciplinary. And whether or not you studied at an undergraduate, at a postgraduate level, or whether or not you use it in business or in public sector settings, e-commerce tends to draw on subject areas like consumer behavior and psychology, management information systems. You need a certain working knowledge of finance and accounting to do proper e-commerce. It, of course, draws on marketing. It draws on production, logistics. And, of course, the almighty issue of ethics and law, because there are ethical and regulatory frameworks that govern the way e-commerce is conducted, both in frontier markets and in developed economic contexts. Now, there are so many benefits that accrue to organizations that decide to deploy e-commerce. One of the most obvious benefits is that it gives you access to larger international markets. Because if I can sit at the University of Ghana and sell consulting services to people domiciled in Kenya or in Vietnam or in Serekunda in the Gambia or in Victoria Island in Nigeria, it gives me a global space to sell my services. If you sell artifacts or handicrafts, or you sell processed pineapple, and through e-commerce platforms and deployments, you can sell to 32 countries instead of just selling to consumers in Accra or Kumasi. Given that your shop is based in Sawam, you can understand how e-commerce expands the marketplace for any producer or marketer. E-commerce is also hypothesized to decrease the cost of creating, processing, distributing, storing, and retrieving paper-based information. And following on from that, we can also argue that it could help you to reduce large stocks of inventories, and overheads by facilitating pool-type supply chain management. I read an article a couple of years ago where some snazzy new shops in cities like Johannesburg don't really spend money and several tens of thousands of dollars actually renting physical floor space. All they do is they have a shop front on the internet and have a warehouse where the goods are stocked. And when you place an order, they find a very innovative way of delivering to you, thereby cutting out the large overheads of probably renting some expensive shop in the Sandton City Mall or some other place like that. And some other benefits also related to what I just said is that it reduces the time between the outlay of capital and the receipt of products and services. Now, the pool type processing I just alluded to also sometimes allows for customization of products and services, which provides competitive advantage to its implementers. If I wanted to order a brand new C-Class or a Jaguar, I could go online and probably customize the offering to the extent that by the time the car is delivered, there'll be certain nuances that are specific to me as Robert Henson. I might pay a premium for it, but as a consumer, I perceive value in that type of customization. And with e-commerce platforms, you can do this kind of customer prioritization. Now, e-commerce also in certain areas can lower telecommunication costs. I discuss this point advisedly because theoretically speaking, when the internet is cheaper, you can do a lot more using e-commerce, and you can get a lot more done using these technological platforms as opposed to having to physically visit different locations in order to conduct business. E-commerce also allows customers to shop or do transactions 24 hours a day. Now when I travel, I can actually place an order ahead of my travel, and by the time I'm checking into a hotel in London or Joburg or in the Gambia, I get a knock on my door where a product I've ordered is delivered to me. So it gives a lot of convenience, gives customers a lot of choices, and then customers can also compare prices on the internet, all because of this advent of technology. It also allows quick delivery of products and services, and in some cases, it helps you get the products in a way that could actually be life-saving. Now, some other benefits to customers include customers can interact with other customers in electronic communities and exchange ideas as well as compare experiences. Customers can also receive relevant and detailed information in seconds rather than in days or in weeks. And most profoundly, e-commerce facilitates competition, which results in substantial discounts, sometimes for the customer. In terms of societal benefits, well, people who live in frontier markets or in rural settings today can enjoy products and services which would otherwise have been unavailable to them through e-commerce deployments. E-commerce also facilitates the delivery of public services at a reduced cost, increases effectiveness, and then improves quality. I mean, any president who wants to be serious about improving the private sector or making the private sector the engine of growth or making the country a business-friendly country in today's contemporary dispensation cannot do it without using technology and e-commerce as a facilitator of rapid services and then cost-effective services. From a societal standpoint as well, I mean, e-commerce now allows individuals to work at home, do less traveling and shopping. So theoretically, there could be less congestion on the roads, there could be less pollution, and the health benefits with this kind of development could be totally phenomenal, because pollution and traffic and congestion is becoming a problem even in frontier markets. So it's no longer a problem of developed economies alone. After touting all the benefits of e-commerce, it's maybe important to also say that, particularly in frontier markets like in Ghana, there could be a few challenges, like for instance, insufficient telecom bandwidth and unstable internet. I mean, nowadays it's improving, but we still are not at the level where we get the relevant speeds and access that's needed to do business at a certain level, even though we are improving. Sometimes there's lack of sufficient system security, reliability standards, and communication protocols. I remember once I did an audit of a university website and submitted a report to a vice chancellor who was so shocked about how porous the website security was, how the protocols would easily be breached, and was basically surprised also about the quality of information that had been displayed, even issues of grammatical accuracy. So e-commerce is a blessing, but there could also be all sorts of security issues, and nowadays we live in a world where cybersecurity threats are real. So those who want to be e-competent must also learn to be e-secure, because security issues are real issues. Sometimes there may be a need for special web servers and other infrastructure in addition to regular network service that could increase cost. For me, this is sort of like a double-edged sword kind of discussion, because in my mind, even though the initial sunk cost may be heavy in deploying the infrastructure needed to conduct e-commerce, if you deploy the e-commerce in an expeditious manner, you will still get the business benefits that come from using e-commerce and e-business solutions. I just spoke about cost, and it has been argued by some people that, look, in developing economic context, e-commerce costs can be high. And sometimes the mistakes that come from not knowing how to properly deploy could make the solutions even more costly. Then I just spoke about security and privacy. A lot of research has been done on business to consumer e-commerce in particular, say that, well, whilst security issues may not be that pervasive, in business to business context, security issues become even more, if you like, severe. Because if you are compromised as a company, as a bank for instance, and somebody is able to hack your system, they might be able to siphon away millions of dollars in a flash, and you have an idea about how they hit you. So security and privacy issues are important. Then, you know, in Africa, in developing economic context, because of this issue of brick and click, where click is online and then brick is offline, and because of our need for physical contact and still a need for some face-to-face interactions, sometimes customers do not trust an unknown faceless seller that they are just interfacing because of technology. And because of that, when they have to give money and so on and so forth, there might be a bit of trepidation. Now, whilst that's an issue, I need to say that looking at the explosion of mobile money in places like Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, I get the sense that we operating in frontier markets are increasingly becoming more and more receptive to doing financial transactions using technological platforms. So this lack of trust, even though it's a limitation, is something that I think is beginning to fade away gradually. So other limiting factors are possible legal issues. What if you supply me something I bought online and what I see as a physical product doesn't conform with what you advertise on your website? Issues of lack of support services. In services marketing, we say that when you have a low contact service like an internet service or buying insurance electronically, when you have a problem, you get even more angry because there's no fiscal person to complain to. So operating in technological modes, companies and institutions and public sector agencies that deploy e-commerce must ensure that they deploy it in a way that gives some kind of tangible support in case users of those platforms have service delivery challenges. Then the last thing I want to discuss is rapidly evolving and changing electronic commerce platforms. And sometimes those who use e-commerce are surprised because the technology can move along. And if they are not brought along to understand where the technology is at, they find it difficult interfacing the technology. As in, for instance, somebody who's selling products overhauls their website. And suddenly the way you used to interface the website and do your shopping and do your browsing and look through catalogs is radically changed. So even the website navigation now becomes a problem. Now, in those sorts of dispensations, people are not too sure whether technology is what they should be using. They would rather they had a fiscal interface to deal with the issues. So what's driving this whole e-commerce phenomenon? Why are people adopting it? Why is it that even in frontier markets, there's an increased uptake of e-commerce, internet, and e-business solutions? Well, because, first of all, we have business pressures. I mean, customers are now becoming more perceptive. Their demands are becoming more severe, and they want convenience, and they want a lot of cost-effective purchases. So companies that are using technology and e-commerce to improve the customer experience are the ones who are winning. And so you need to use IT now in order to improve the customer experience. Sometimes IT is also used because from a supply chain standpoint, you can derive benefits from using technology to find cheaper sources of products and so on and so forth. So e-commerce and e-business is also closely linked to the phenomenon of business process engineering, because it has been argued by some scholars and practitioners that by the time you introduce e-business and e-commerce, you do it because you want to do some sort of business process engineering, where you want to create a more customer-focused approach for your business entity. You want to reduce cycle time and time to market. You want to improve empowerment of employees and create a more collaborative workspace. And most profoundly, you want to improve your business alliances and improve your value chain relationships. All these things come under the broad umbrella of business process engineering and is closely linked to the issue of e-commerce and e-business deployments. So nowadays, everybody wants reduced time to market. Everybody wants enhanced brand or corporate images. Everybody wants new sales channels. And these are the things that e-commerce and e-business are forward-looking companies. Other changes in the workplace include technology learning, organizational learning, the development of new business models, and all these have their basis in the deployment of e-business and e-commerce. Now, the impacts of e-business and e-commerce extend also to manufacturing, logistics management, finance, accounting, human capital management, and I've sort of addressed these things when I discussed the fact that e-business and e-commerce is useful for managing all your value chain relationships. Value chain is from Michael Porter, where it describes a set of primary and secondary activities, with the primary activities including things like the provision of customer service, things like sales, things like inbound logistics, outbound logistics, and the support service including things like IT deployment, human resource management, and so on and so forth. Across all the full spectrum of value chain activities, e-business and e-commerce hold great promise for improving the capabilities of firms operating in frontier markets and therefore improving their ability to become more profitable. So thank you for following me up to the end of session 1.